Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show. The cats that I've been interviewing have had an impact on so many records that my generation and older generations have lived off of for years. They play little parts and serve the song as conduits for information coming through them from the heavens. For the most part, the cats had a chance to play with the original masters of the music and learn to get out of their own way and become part of the musical conversation. I am all in for the musicians as we slowly move forward after a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. Spiritual live music is a healing force and can bridge humanity's gaps by touching hearts and souls. Every time I go to a concert in the last couple of years, I am bringing that voltage to the bandstand from minute one, because I want the cats to get out of their thinking mind. You get that crowd activation, and the next thing you know, through that intensity, you're getting the musicians off. That's a spiritual experience, raising the collective consciousness. The cats revitalize my spirit and get the creative juices flowing again so I can let the body dance. We live in this time where people feel the only way they have freedom is by abandoning logic, abandoning truth. Institutions and norms are crumbling and the leadership is too old. Each generation before naturally passed the lineage of leadership to a future generation. As seekers, we must identify new leaders, leaders who make others aware of their habitual nature and motivate them to cultivate their true nature. Leaders who radiate their light and aura back to those who look up to them. Leaders who exude grace, even in the face of frustration, pain, and injustice. Life is not always peaceful, especially if you're a professional artist. You have to know your instrument, hone your sound, be a leader and a teammate at the same time, and find places to play that believe in the profession of music. That it's not a pay-to-play game. That music is to be felt and not for pacification. That you need to burn and go beyond the atmosphere because we will be leaving this planet for other worlds. Amy Helm, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Wow. What a beautiful way to step into a conversation about music, and what beautiful writing. Thank you,
my friend,
for reading that.
You know, I have to start with this because his spirit is here today. He was with me last night, and I really would love you to talk about, you know, sort of the fond memories or the experiences that you had with Jasper Diamond Helm.
Oh my gosh, going straight to the...
because Ronnie Hawkins, Ronnie, when I interviewed Ronnie, rest in peace, he was just like talking about Diamond, and he just... Yeah. The guy, I mean, he was from such a different generation, but yet... Yeah. I mean, I just would love you to talk... I mean, being his he must have been crazy about you, so I just kind of wanted you to talk about him.
JD, Papa, of course, is what I called him. Papa was my clearest memory of him. I was close with him. I was close to my grandmother. My dad's mom was really, we were closer in our conversation. But Papa was the teacher of music in the family.
Wow.
And I'll tell you something interesting about him. Actually, I was just thinking about this because I was just down south playing a set of music on the porch of my father's childhood home, which is this like sharecropper's cabin.
I saw the picture. I saw that picture. Yeah, it was beautiful. Yeah,
And Papa his mother was a 100% Choctaw Indian, a woman named Dolly, who married his dad when she was probably 14 or 15. And his dad was probably 15 or 16 and worked in one of the logging camps. So all these young teenagers were, like working. They didn't go to school. They were all very poor and probably got up to a third grade education or something like that and basically started working. And I was thinking about his mother, Papa's mother, Dolly, because when I was down there on that porch singing, I thought, it's cool to celebrate my father's career, and I'm so proud of what my dad, who he was and the musician he was, and honored and proud to have been able to stand side by side with him and sing with him and all of that. And yet, when I was on that porch, I thought, but what about the women down here?
Absolutely.
Like, what about the women who were down here with their kids and no water and no electricity and out sharecropping in the fields and babies on their hip and having to cook in that hot heat and all of it? I mean, that's just a day. That's just a day's chores, let alone the suffering.
Oh,
and the
absolutely.
lack of
Yeah,
medical
absolutely.
attention and losing kids. I mean, I can't think of a single family I knew down there that didn't, lose a baby to pneumonia, because in the 1940s in Marvel, Arkansas, it might as well have been 1800. It was very
Yeah.
It was very remote and very undeveloped down there. And so anyway, talking about Papa, I was thinking about his mother, Dolly, and I thought, and of all the women, how strange it must have been for her to sort of be in this and have her own history and tradition kind of erased and not really part of her story. It wasn't something celebrated. There's nothing about her being a Choctaw that I know about. There's no stories. There's no words that were passed down. Do you know what I mean? I was just kind of contemplating that when I was just down there. And
yeah. No, first of all, can you, I mean, because I've talked to cats who from like the New Orleans area, and they're, the Indians and the slaves, they actually collaborated a lot, and the Indians would bring them tambourines and rhythms, but I mean Choctaw, what kind of lineage is that as it relates to Native American? Is it mixed culture, mixed race?
No, I think Choctaw was just a tribe of Native Indians. I don't actually know as much about it as I should. I mean, just last month I was down there thinking, I need to know about this.
Absolutely.
Because, it was, and it was fascinating to me that was his mom. And, Papa was a very musical guy, and he played guitar and he sang and he loved it. And, and I was just thinking about all of that, and I was just thinking about how I know more about him than I do about her, and that was interesting to me. But I will tell you something funny about Papa, which is that he had a way of teaching music. He would sit there with me across the table, and he'd be singing me the song Little Birds. Do you know the song Little Birds? It's
probably if I heard it, but go ahead. Yeah.
It's an old, he used to call them story songs, and it's like one of these, 5-verse songs that he would teach me that has a long story that unfolds. And he was very particular when he taught you a song. He didn't want you to drift your eye contact away for even a moment. Like if you looked at the clock and he was in the middle of a verse, he would start singing really loud to pull your attention back to him so that he could teach you the whole song. And I have a funny memory of him trying to teach me, or he did teach me Little Birds, but I was maybe, 16 or 17, and God knows I had a lot on my mind besides learning Little Birds with him in the kitchen. And I just remember being in the kind of height of my teenage girl, waiting to see a friend, waiting for the phone to ring, waiting to go out, wondering what we were going to do tonight.
Absolutely.
Trying to teach me that song.
I mean, that's where my older daughter is right now. So he would raise his voice and let you know that you better focus on him.
Oh, yeah, it would just get a little bit more intense and a little louder when he got to this. My eyes were drifting, if the phone rang, that was he'd kind of just bring my attention right back, let someone else pick it up, and he was funny that way.
It's funny, I have these great, I'll read a couple of quotes. One quote here from the legendary guitarist Jim Weeder. When I interviewed him, he said, Amy Helm can play some drums. She grew up listening to her father. She's a natural talent. I love Amy. And then the other cat who has left us, who I just loved so much, was the legendary multi-instrumentalist Howard Johnson. And he said, that on the Dirt Farmer album, when it first came out, the tracks that you were on, a lot of people thought it was Levon, but it was you. And
this is true.
And I just, maybe it's hard for you because you are you, but I just wanted you to talk about maybe going back to, I mean, in the womb, was your mom and dad together a lot? Did you feel a lot of, were you told that you were always around sort of that pulse and that live music experience even before you came out? Because I mean, I love the idea of. I mean, I play drums not professionally, but I have felt that four-way coordination. It is a magical feeling. I'm not from the academy, but for you, like as a natural talent, I just wonder if you knew how far back that started, if it was from the womb.
Wow. Well, I mean, I just don't know, but I think that music is most definitely passed down genetically too. I mean, it seems like everybody I know who plays, whether they do it for a living or not, they have someone in their family who played as well. There's someone back there, a grandparent who was an organ player in the church or
Right.
whatever it was. There seems to always be some of that. With drumming, I can play 2 beats, and I can play them in 3, and I can play them in 4, and that's about the extent of my drumming.
Well, I mean, you're getting some pretty heavy compliments.
Yeah. Sorry?
No, I mean, these guys don't throw around compliments a lot. Weeder and Johnson, I mean, you can't get higher compliments than that. I'm just saying that the groove and the feel is a natural thing, probably genetic. I just was wondering, maybe more to the point, were your folks, I mean, because, like, I've interviewed Jim Keltner, and he first met your dad at Sammy Davis Jr.'s house. It was about a year before you were born. I'm just trying to figure out how much they were together and how much maybe you were around some of the live experiences. Part of that is just like, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, but vibration is just there. And I was wondering if you were ever aware, or if your mom lived somewhere else, when you were born, and you kind of went back.
No, I mean, I'm sure I was around. I'm sure I was around music, and I mean, who knows about vibrations? And interesting, I have 2 boys myself that are 14 and 11, and my 14-year-old is deep into the drums, like without any. In fact, not only did I not put that on him, I probably went the extreme opposite of just completely hands off in terms of music, so they never, so that they came to it themselves if they were going to. And my son is really into the drums, and he was, when I was pregnant with him, I was playing rambles every week and singing with Ola Bell and all of that stuff. And I do think that, when you're pregnant, you can feel the baby. I'm sure you've heard this before from their own experience too. The baby moves. I'm sure when your partner was pregnant with your daughter, you probably would. You can feel them move more in the belly when there's more outside noise, and that's always an interesting thing. They really do respond to, to the sounds that they hear in the world.
What I think it's beautiful that you didn't, that you let him come to it naturally. I mean, in some ways, I just wonder, like, when was the first time, has he been into the drums from, is it only kind of recently that he went hardcore into it, or is it something that he's been?
He was, he could always, I always saw it in him. He was always just very, very musical. Even when he was a toddler, he would learn, Frosty the Snowman, and he'd learn all the verses, and he'd remember all the lyrics. And I just always had a sense of, his musicality when he was very little, but he probably started playing drums when he was about 8 and got into it, and then he abandoned it. He quit when he was like 10, and he was like, I'm done, I'm not playing anymore. And I didn't say anything, and he didn't play for like a year, and then I don't even remember how he fell back into it, and then we just haven't looked back. I mean, he's really full on. It's his whole life. I mean, it's comparable to, a kid who really excels in sports, and you're like a sports mom. That's kind of what
well, no, but I mean,
which is wonderful.
Well, can you talk a little bit about, Because how old is he now? 16 or 15?
He's 14.
So he's
My
14.
oldest son is 14.
Yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
you go back to the 60s and 70s. He would, if he had grown up in an urban center, he would have already been part of a union. He probably would have been playing in the studios. He probably would have been singing for his supper in some ways. I mean, he would have been living
That's
under,
interesting.
and like.
That's interesting.
Yeah, well, no, because
He's having a modern day experience of that, in that he has a Meters cover band that plays.
Well, that's freaking badass. No, so I wanted you to talk about what that full plate of gumbo musically looks like. I mean, I love that. If you were going to have any kind of cover band, that would be the band to do it. But what else is he? I mean, at 14, can you talk about how his musical life right now, what that looks like?
Well, yeah, he is so incredibly lucky to have incredible teachers. He has, in his own, just his family community, between me and his dad, my ex-husband is a wonderful musician as well, and he's, we are very much in each other's lives as parents, and so and Jay is a great saxophone player and plays with the Midnight Ramble band and plays with Little Feat. And so Lee has grown up around all of his and my friends, and has, Tony Leone, who's a wonderful old friend of mine who plays drums in the Ramble band.
Legendary cat.
Yes, yeah. And he's one of Lee's mentors and takes him under his wing, and there's just a bunch of people, musicians that are kind of, teaching him and guiding him along. And then he has a wonderful teacher named Jason Bowman, who runs a school up here called the Rock Academy. And he is, one great teacher can shape a kid's life so profoundly, and I'm seeing that a lot with Jason. He's just an excellent, his expectations are very high for his students. He doesn't allow any bullshit with it. He has the right mission statement and intention, and is teaching them to be respectful, and he's kind of kicking their ass in the most loving but strong way that you would want a teacher. It's like getting a great coach.
No, I'm with you 100%.
For a basketball team.
Right. No, you try to get you try to get the most. The key is when things are really seemingly going very well, to continue to inspire them to get more out of them. That's always the whether it's sports or music. And to do that gracefully is a big challenge. But if you can do it,
he's really incredible. And this Rock Academy it's just an incredible place. There are students. So Lee is part of the advanced ensemble, which is called show band, which is for kids that are 12 and up, that are more serious about playing and pursuing music as a career. And then there's a lot of kids that join, that do shows, younger kids that do shows there just because they love it and they want the experience of trying to learn Neil Young on a guitar. And so then they do a Neil Young show and they participate in it. And it's just, I watch. I was thinking a lot about Rock Academy and Jason and that whole scene when you were reading your intro to the podcast, because lately, because of the age, both my kids are in it. My younger son is now starting to play piano and sing, and he's joined it. So I'm over there all the time, and I'm at the shows all the time, and I'm getting to meet the kids and connect, and I'm even doing some vocal coaching when I'm home, helping the kids with their harmonies and stuff. And it is such a reminder of the power of music when you have a bunch of people doing it for the pure love of it, and of all levels too. When you have, kids who maybe their calling is not music, but they're doing it to exercise the practice of that surrender and the joy of it. And when you see it in that purest form, it is such a reminder of it. I mean, going to those Rock Academy shows is one of the most delightful things. It always resets me and inspires me. It's really great.
So much in my head right now, Amy Helm. I mean, I wanted to, this is interesting because obviously, I mean, in some ways, I love your dad's side projects, the RCO All Stars, the stuff he did. I don't know if you were kind of almost old enough to be on this tour, but it was like the Russell Smith and Levon went on this incredible tour. But the point is your dad. It's Levon this and Levon that, and I just wanted you to talk about how you learned to surrender and basically accept. Like Michael Shreve, who's the drummer from Santana. His drum solo, the weather held up at Woodstock, and his drum solo was caught on TV, which at the time was still a relatively new resource. He became an overnight sensation, and then for the next 40 or 50 years, he's creating his own art and music, and people keep going back to the Woodstock thing. And it was driving him. He's like he was trying to make people make a right turn or make try to check this out, and it would just drive him nuts. And at a certain point, he was like, you know what, just don't say anything. Be grateful that you had an impact on people's lives. And as it relates to you, who is a natural music, you have natural rhythm, natural music, but you do want, and you have created your own original music. And I just wanted you to talk a little bit about if there was a period of time where you kind of surrendered to the idea, okay, my dad has this legacy, I get it. We're going to play a lot of these great tunes. They're iconic. They're going to live on forever. But I'm still okay. I'm content creating my own music. And even if it doesn't get, like that insecurity of wanting to be recognized for who you are. Can you talk about how you sort of evolved to this point where, because, I don't need to tell you, that, the band is, your dad was just such a monster personality and player and actor. And I just wanted you to talk about how, if there was a seminal time where you sort of accepted that and then also came to peace with the fact that you want to create your own original stuff.
Well, yeah, gosh, it's a long. I'm thinking of a way to.
No, you just riff any way you want. You don't.
Actually,
yeah.
No, it's just I could. It's such a long answer with so many layers and levels to it. That also depend. That have evolved over time, and I think that the first thing I would say is that when you have a parent or someone in your family that has such a light on them, and then you go into the same business, it's impossible to not have people project something onto you, right?
That's
and
what I'm saying.
Mean
exactly.
Well, even if they are the kindest, most supportive people, and even if they dig what you do solo. Even if they dig the way you sing or the way you play, it's impossible to not project something onto someone. I have done it myself, meeting a kid of, or the wife of so-and-so, or the brother of so-and-so. It's kind of a part of our human nature. I think that the first thing I would say is that from a very young age, I always sang in bands since I was, I always sang and played music. That's just what I could naturally do since I was very young. So it was already a part of my identity in school and second grade and the choir and third grade, and I would play piano and write songs, and then I was in bands by the time I was 14. So it was always my peers that were giving me the most honest reflection back of who I was. What is my, what I mean? Like,
can you give an example? I would love an example, because you're talking like early 80s. This is so late 70s, early 80s. There was no internet. There was no visual. We weren't saturated with visual material. I'd love if you could give an example. Honesty.
Well, what else I got was a real, gave me some space with all of this, is that my dad, no one knew who my dad was. By the time I was in ninth grade, and I was 14 years old, and I was getting serious, I sang in the jazz ensemble, and I was always a singer, and people knew me. My friends knew me as singing. I sang in bands. I sang in jazz bands. I sang in rock and roll bands. No one knew who the band was. like maybe a couple of friends had parents that knew the band and thought it was cool that my dad was Levon Helm. So I had this kind of, you know, this time period where it was just he was completely obscure.
That is absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, and that's because we were just in this sort of punk rock world. I mean, or the band had broken up. The original band had broken up after the last waltz. But how do you account for that?
The original band, their thing was just not. They weren't. You know, it wasn't 1970. It wasn't Big Pink. It was just a different period of time. And my dad and those guys were in a different place, and so I had that experience. And as time has gone on, you know, it wasn't sort of like the choice to play my own music instead of the band stuff, because it wasn't ever. My own thing was always in place. It was just how much was I going to explore it. But I really sang in bands from the time I was 14 up through now. And I was in a group called Olabelle when I was, you know, from age 30 to about, I mean, that was 10 years in that band. And then with my dad's band for 10 years. And before Olabelle, I was in all kinds of different projects around town. And I did a lot of jingle work and singing as a background vocalist and all that kind of stuff. And I say all of this not to sound like I'm reading my resume, but just to try to explain, I guess, that it wasn't that I was untouched by insecurity, but I also had a real clear reflection of who I was as a singer, and I had a community of fellow players and singers. You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of where that's where I would understand kind of where I was at, what I wanted to get better at, you know, and I've gotten to play with some really phenomenal people and still do, just musicians and singers that might not be famous, but are just, you know, the greatest teachers I've had. And another aspect of this too, of course, is that I was in my dad's band for 10 years. So instead of it being like a looming kind of legacy that was shadowing me, he was like my greatest mentor. You know what I mean? So it changed the dynamic for me a bit. I think those parts of it, if that makes sense.
Oh, first of all, I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
Did you wind up doing some background singing on a Sesame Street record?
I think yes.
Okay.
Long
yeah, no, we're talking like 1980. I was looking. Yeah. I'm like, can you?
That's when I was a kid.
Do you have a memory of that? I mean, I'm trying to figure out. Like, I was like, is she?
I kind of do. I do. I have a memory of like standing in a circle with a bunch of kids, and that was pretty cool for sure. Absolutely.
Can you talk? I just, you know, because, you know, Sarah graciously sent me a bunch of, you know, sort of little bullet points about things that you're working on or are doing right now, and like you said, you always around great musicians and you've had great mentors. But can you just, you know, sort of in my intro, I mean, I just feel like cats like yourself, people that are playing music, especially spiritual music or music that is healing, is like you guys are as important as, you know, medical doctors in this time. And I just wonder, setting yourself aside, you know, there's just this, I just feel like, I think it's great, you know, Little Feat, Leone, Sherrard, those cats, they're coming to Tucson, awesome. I love certain cover bands, but, you know, you got Tower of Power out there, you know, 40 years running, Steve Miller, Journey, all this cover band stuff now in this time. And I just wanted you to talk about, for cats that are seekers and really hell-bent on creating original music, what are the challenges today in terms of actually being able to take that music out of the studio and get it on the road and actually sing for your supper?
Yeah, well, the most honest answer is that the challenge is the music industry.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, what I'm saying is, like, you know, when you said to me,
difficult to overcome, although there's always a solution. So I don't mean it in a defeatist kind of tone, but Yeah, it's difficult. You just got to play what you love and connect with people that you love. I can say one thing that I've experienced is that I've excuse me, I've always trusted my intuition with connecting to people that see me and I see them, right? Like you play with people that you just have a kismet and a chemistry with. It's not that you need to have them like you or that they need to have you like what they're doing. You just click in with each other. And when I have followed that, which I always have, and I have always put that above and beyond looking for a power move or an ambitious positioning of myself in the industry. Like when you just go with the thing that feels good and the person who's making the song you're trying to convey is coming to life, when you're in a room with this person, that's always going to lead to the right thing, even if it doesn't lead to, the press that you want or the name on the bill that you want or the producer that you thought you wanted. Like all of that stuff it's very easy to feel like you're up against the clock and up against so much competition for young people. But really, if you just stick with what feels good, you're going to land right where you're supposed to. I really, really believe that with my whole heart. That's one thing I feel clear about.
I'm curious. I just interviewed, ironically, a good friend of yours yesterday, Chris Masterson, who you've collaborated with quite a bit.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And
he's wonderful.
A great cat and amazing player.
Yeah. Yes.
And I kind of wanted to ask you the same thing because, like you and Josh right now are, deep in the production process. And you're, and I was asking him about, because when, they made their first album, him and his wife, and then it was kind of just done, in a very sort of stripped down way. He doesn't even think he gave himself credit as a producer. And then they got noticed by New West, and then it was like, okay, make an album, tour the album, I forget the exact amount of time, then make another album, tour it again. And I wanted to ask you, have you gone the opposite direction? In some cases, the band might have done this. Other bands have done it. Jazz bands, Pat Metheny. Can you talk about a time when you allowed, you road tested songs and allowed them to take on a life of their own, and then went in the studio to record them? I seem to have an issue with the certain amount of people that feel this necessity to get in the studio and record songs before they really are a living, breathing organism. And I wonder if you've actually done that in the past, and if you think that that's kind of a good way to go, because, like, for instance, the Grateful Dead, they didn't get in the studio for 7 years to make an album, and they spent 5 years working. They also were aggressively touring the country, but still, those songs, once they got in the studio, and it's not about making a hit, but they had developed their own life, and I wonder if you've done that with your own work.
Well, I've had different experiences with different albums. Actually, when I made my second record, I've made 3 records in total, and my second one I made with Joe Henry, and he actually asked me specifically to not sing the songs on my gigs, to not get too familiar with them, so that my performances of them were live and kind of discovered in the moment, as opposed to practiced, in the muscle memory of the voice. And that was really interesting. And I think that, that was scary and added to my vulnerability, I think, when I sang those tunes in the studio. And interesting. And I've done it the other way, too. I've done it, the record with Josh, I think just because of the timing of it and the way the material came together, I had sang maybe 2 or three of those songs I had done on my set live a few times, but the rest were so new that they also were kind of unexplored. And I think both have merit. Both was that sort of your question about?
Well, no. I mean, I want to go back to to the Henry methodology. What exactly he was asking you to play instrumental, play the tunes instrumentally live, but don't sing them. I'm trying to figure out what he was asking you to do.
Oh no, like in other words, once we had the song list and we knew what we were going to go in and cut, he I had some touring coming up. I had months between the final song list we made and then the actual recording. There was some time in between in which I had tours lined up, but instead of going out and playing the songs live, I held them back, held them off the set list so that I would go in and sort of sing them for the, I sang them in my living room to prepare for the record a little bit, but had not taken them in front of an audience, which changes how we sing a song, I think, most definitely.
I just think that, sometimes it just, to me, like, I also want to get your opinion on this. I mean, I'm looking at it more from, like, when I talk about people, this idea of, I remember, again, going back to Weeder, he showed up at, I don't know what club it was, but, when they were doing Wheel on Fire. I mean, this was all very new, cutting edge, interesting music, and people were digging it. And the point is that, like, Miles Davis, I mean, Lee Morgan, these guys in the jazz world, they were like, their philosophy was, we really dig what we're doing, and we hope you as the audience digs what we're doing. But even if you don't, we're still going to do it because we And I just feel like there's this. With just the way we sort of consume music now and the ticket prices and sort of this insatiable desire for cover music and this idea of placating to the audience, when in fact Bill Graham was like, no. The audience needs to dig this stuff because they're going to dig it. They may not know who Malo is. They may not know who the Sons of Champlin are. They may not know who the band is, but they need to hear it. It's good for them. And I just wonder about, like, without alienating people, because, I mean, you do want to, sing for your supper. I mean, what do you feel about the idea of people, it's okay to be uncomfortable at a show. I mean, John Coltrane, when he started to blow modally, I mean, there were women in the crowd that would be like, make him stop. But he just played through it, and I just, to me, it's like, there's sort of this idea. And I just wanted you to talk about, in your own existence, like, if you feel it's okay for the audience to walk out of a gig with feeling a little bit uncomfortable or being or being a little introspective. I mean, dude, if I was that age in the 60s, I'd want to walk home burning. I want to burn. And, I don't want to form. Here's the question. How do you avoid getting into a formula trip when you're touring? How do you keep yourself engaged and make it and make it different? Because after a while, like you're a jazz singer. I mean, how do you play the same song? How do you never play the same song the same way once?
That's a very, very good question. I started to laugh because I remembered being hired for a folk festival, which I often am, except that no one knows that my band is like one of the loudest rock and roll bands sometimes I've ever heard.
Yeah, no, it's not an acoustic band. Yeah, right.
Which I'm proud of,
yeah.
But I have actually, not only have I had people walk out, but I played a folk festival. We had a good slot, too. We were headlining, and there had to have been 800 or 1,000 people under this one tent at this festival that we were doing this headlining thing, and we all got up there, and the electric guitar and the bass and the drums, and we were on fire. We kicked off with Didn't It Rain, a nice version of a Mahalia Jackson song with a great New Orleans kind of rhythm section thing and a searing electric guitar. And I think we got to the maybe halfway through the first chorus, I looked up, and people were filing out by the hundreds.
Okay, I want to just stop you. I want to stop you right there.
Let me paint a visual.
Go ahead.
For
Yeah,
you.
go ahead. Please. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Imagine being on stage and you're looking out at like a white tent, but this is a tent with many entrances, right? Like imagine it kind of dotted exits through the tent around there, and about 1,000 people just walking out in droves, like by the hundreds, and there was maybe 50 people left, and they had the greatest night, and so did I. And I have to tell you that I laughed till I cried about that with my friend Martha Scanlon. So
I think that might be the greatest story.
Yes, let people walk out, keep good friends around you, and laugh at everything that feels shitty, because those are the things that you'll laugh about 10 years from now even. And, they're the things that make it colorful. And I'll tell you what, to answer the second part of your question, that's the shit that'll make you sing something different, too.
Exactly.
Because whether you're embarrassed or angry or already arrived to humor or you don't give a shit or whatever the array of emotions you could have about a moment like that or a gig like that, you'll sing the song different. And you'll sing it different the next night when you're remembering that.
I had just chills up my arm when you told that story, because I don't know if you've ever played with David Nelson from the New Riders of the Purple Sage, but he...
No, I have not.
So he was, fully ensconced in the bluegrass scene with Garcia and those cats, and he would sit at the Fillmore West. He would stand behind the speakers, and a lot of when the Dead were still the Warlocks, so they were generally playing a lot of cover tunes, but then they'd save one tune where they'd really stretch out. And he said when they would start doing that jam tune, that unusual tune, he would just say that everybody would start to flock to the exits. And
oh, really?
Yeah, and it was amazing. I mean, it was, and it's just the way you describe it. And so the point is, a lot of people would come up to Garcia, people that at the show say, why don't you just play this one tune, man? It's going to be recognizable. People are going to love it. And Garcia would say, what's the point? And I just wanted to know about, okay, so that festival under the white tent in the folk fest, I mean, you had already developed, how have you learned to take what you do seriously, but not take yourself that seriously? Because ultimately, people will say, well, that's not folk music. It's not acoustic. It's, but it's all music. And I just wanted you to talk to younger cats about the moxie and the sort of ability to sort of use that word surrender, but really be yourself and learn to do what you do seriously. But like you said, you were laughing your ass off. It didn't. And to me, that's the...
I mean, you can't... You're kind of... When you get to that point, you're like, all right, this is like... Because your band's looking at you like, holy shit, is she going to be all right?
I don't understand why people were running away. It was a beautiful tune. It wasn't like you're playing metal or something. I mean, I don't get it.
They just weren't expecting drums and guitar and that whole festival, that whole weekend was very funny. The Sisters Folk Festival. I ended up, the thing that added kind of more to the insult to injury and more humor to the original punchline is that wasn't like I got to pack up and go home the next day. Like I had to stick around that festival and play 2 or 3 more very badly attended shows dotted along the beautiful setup of Sisters Folk and Sisters Oregon. But I just think that I mean it was just, I think you arrive at the humor, like I said, just by, you think about your heroes. Like, there you go, the Grateful Dead. Like, those guys can walk through this. I can walk through this. And it actually reminds me of something that my dad said to me that I want to share with you, because it was such a great teaching. And I think about it all the time, and I repeat it a lot, because I think it's so right on. I remember him saying to me, we were talking about something. I was telling him something I was insecure about. I don't remember what it was. It was something musical that I was working on, or maybe a bad gig I had had, or I don't know what it was. And he said, honey, he said, all those people that you respect, all the people that are your heroes that made you want to sing in the first place, he said, every single one of them was afraid of the same thing that you are. And what you're afraid of is you're afraid of falling on your ass. Mm-hmm. He said, and all those folks were afraid of it too, and all of them did. Everybody you love fell on their ass, figuratively speaking, and got up and dusted themselves off and kept going.
I love it.
You know, and I love it too.
Because I'm always I just feel like, well, as candidly as you can, do you feel that you've created some of your best art under the most adverse circumstances? I mean, to me, like, that's, you only grow through adversity. And
Well, you had, yes. Yeah. I agree 100%. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I mean, it's beautiful because, I deal with it with my kids. I mean, they're not musicians, but they're, as teenagers, you're completely lost. You really don't know who you are, what you're doing, and I just try to harken back to my own experiences and people around me, and just being 43, it's just sort of like, okay, I know that I've been humbled. Everybody falls on their ass. Like all the cats that I've talked to, they, like you said, dust yourself off. Yet at the same time, I also feel to create cathartic or really beautiful music is oftentimes done through that adversity. And I think a lot of, like you're talking about, the insecurity comes where people are going up to this line of comfortability and they're feeling a little bit stagnant, but yet they're also petrified that if they play beyond what they know, they're going to fall on their ass, which is what they have to do to keep growing. It's a fine line.
Yeah, it really is. It constantly requires you, is requiring of a person to completely, I don't want to say, to leave behind everything they know and start over from scratch from the first note of whatever it is you're playing. It's just the way that it is, and those gigs where something comes up that makes you feel uncomfortable, whether it's the way we're playing something or singing something or a story we tell in between songs or tripping, anything. You can trip and fall on stage. I mean, there's any little thing that can happen, and then it just forces you into this kind of, this very clear conversation with yourself, which is, am I going to stick with myself? Like it's like the Essays of Self-Reliance from Emerson.
Absolutely.
I remember there's one of them that says something along the lines of, there comes a time in every man's education where you face yourself and you have to decide if you're going to stand with yourself for better or for worse. And I think about that a lot too. And it's the gift of being a musician. It's why we all do it, even though we're all broke, and even though the industry sucks and the money is inconsistent, because there's nothing else more satisfying. It really is
Absolutely.
It is your church, it is your church.
Did you, I know you were just a young girl at the time, but do you have any memories of Shangri-La?
I do have memories of Shangri-La, but they have nothing to do with music. What was the last waltz like? What was Shangri-La like? And yes, I have memories, but they're the kind of memories that you can imagine. What would you remember if you were 6? You'd remember, there was a big hill that we played on, that we played hide and seek on, and
it wasn't like you were in the studio.
I did. A refrigerator full of Coca-Cola that I had easy access to because people were too distracted to say no. That was the good stuff, Those were the good.
No, I can't. I'm just when you're when the other thing is when you were 14 and you started to play gigs, I mean, at that time, you know, your dad had sort of the getaway in. Did you have a chance to play with like? Did you have a chance to play with Butterfield or at any of those gigs?
I did not with Paul, no, but I did. No, but I did. Yeah, I mean, I was around. You know, I was in and out at that time because that was the time when my dad was. I mean, they were all so enslaved to their addictions and struggling. You know, they were all struggling and they didn't have it together yet. So that was like, I wasn't around a lot of that at that time because when I was around them, I was carving out, you know, a social place of my own with my friends and you know, things that felt manageable, I guess, at the time.
So
you know?
I
say that with a lot of love.
No, absolutely. I mean,
it was what it was.
So when you talk, you know, just in your bio, it talks about like you spent time growing up in Woodstock, New York City, and Los Angeles. Like when you started to get on the bandstand, you know, 14 years old. Was that in Woodstock, or was it mainly? It was also maybe in L.A. or where were you playing?
No, that was with my high school band, Chilly Winds.
Whoa, Chilly Winds!
Oh yeah, at a bar in New York City. We used to play these clubs like up in, you know, like on 106th Street in Broadway. Cannons, I remember it was
That
called.
Is sweet. Was that
so
upper?
I did that,
wow.
And I got to study jazz with an incredible teacher at my high school, which was in New York City, and his name was Aaron Bell, and he was a huge influence on me, and I sang in his jazz ensemble, and that was kind of my thing, singing with Aaron, and then doing my rock and roll cover band gigs at Cannons, you know.
So, can you just talk a little bit about were you singing like your own original jazz tunes, or were you just kind of channeling people like Billie Holiday and Sarah Vaughan? I mean, I'm curious about how that intersected, you know, actively with the Cannons gig, and how you merged what you were learning from Aaron with sort of more of the rock.
I wished I had been more sophisticated to be able to merge them. I mean, I guess if anything was merging, it was just the presence required to kind of stand and sing a jazz standard.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe taking that same quiet and focus and trying to put it to the other material I was singing, and trying to kind of stay in my tone and develop my tone as a singer. I think that probably influenced me a lot. I hadn't thought about that actually till you asked that question, but maybe that's something that seems like something I was standing in at the time.
Well, when you say you studied with him, I would love you to, because I just have this hard time like believing that, you know, some street language like blues or jazz can be codified in a curriculum. And I realize you didn't go to Berkeley, but like now, like your son, I mean, don't, you know, who am I? But it's like, you know, for me, it's almost like I feel like he should just be on the bandstand and writing original music and playing, and because I just don't know how you can really, what the Academy offers anymore. And I just wonder what you could talk about from those lessons, because I mean, you were 14 playing at a bar in New York. I mean, Cannons was, I mean, it was, I mean, Ahmad Jamal was 10 years old when he joined the Union. I mean, kids were allowed to sit with their dads when they were playing. You know, there was a lot more of an ability to sort of grow up quicker. And now, so I just wonder what you took away from that experience in that jazz community. Maybe you learned to sing more behind the beat. I don't know. Maybe nothing. But the point is, I just wonder about what was the most useful thing that you took away from that experience?
Gosh, well, he was a really intense teacher, Dr. Aaron Bell. He had been Duke Ellington's bass player for many years,
Whoa.
and
Whoa.
I just loved him. He just made me, he just was like a bright light. And I think that I learned so much. I mean, he taught us very difficult arrangements of standards and had us trying to do choral jazz singing, and that in and of itself required a lot of focus, and also relying on the arrangement and the other voices to make your own thing shine, like learning the collaborative aspect of harmony singing, learning to trust yourself when you're singing a lead, learning to open your ears. I think that it, just being able to be around a teacher like that was what a lucky and kind of just incredible thing that I ended up with him as my jazz teacher at Trinity.
Is it fair to say that you were savvy enough to realize that you didn't want to be a starving genius, so you moved into more of a rock based? Because jazz. The amount of jazzers that died broke or poor.
Yeah.
It's. Not that
Yeah. I have to say, and I'm discovering this more as I get older. I'm 51 now, and I think back. Now I have a son who's 14. I think about myself at that age.
Right.
I just didn't have that. I can't explain it. Like, I just wasn't thinking about being a professional singer. I just wanted to, it's just like what I could do.
I dig. No, I dig.
What I was good at. And it's sort of, I just wanted to get better at singing, and I just kind of followed it. Music really found me, and so I went into what felt right. Like, then I would start singing with a band, and then I would start singing. Then I got older, I would get hired to do some harmony singing because I got good at that. And then I kind of fell into a band that was Olabelle, which was a deep collaborative band with a lot of harmony singing. I just kind of, things have, the creative next step has always seemed to find me. I don't know if I've been as intentional about it as I am now, which feels great, which is kind of a different season for me in my life. Just choosing what I want to pursue next, and who I want to work with, and what I want it to look like, and being a little bit more specific in my intention for that. But when I was young, I just kind of was just following the road in front of me, so to speak. And I also, that also makes me sound really like happy-go-lucky. I also think that I really lacked ambition, which is not always, I think that people that really want to get to a certain place by a certain point and get good at something, this and that, and have a specific pattern of what they want, how they want it to look, I think you have to have a lot of ambition in the music industry for that kind of career. And so I didn't ever really just have that. It just wasn't my personality.
Yeah, and I think the other, ambition, I feel the same way. Part of it is not having a lot of expectations and just sort of figuring out how to be in the flow, and not. I feel like I try to approach things with intention and no expectations. I have to read you this quote from Tony Leone, and then you can respond. He said, this is my interview with him. He said, on our first tour with Olabelle, it was part of something T-Bone Burnett produced called the Great High Mountain Tour, which was a second installment of his Down from the Mountain Tour, which included a lot of great bluegrass people, including Ralph Stanley, Alison Krauss, the Cox family, Norman and Nancy Blake. We were around all these dyed-in-the-wool bluegrass and folk musicians. Being that we only got to play 3 songs a night, and being that it was quote-unquote old time in its flavor, they said, you guys can come on the tour, but what you're going to do is just sing. Leone, if you want to come on the tour, you're not going to play any drum set. For me at that point, it was really strange. I was really nervous about going on that tour because I felt like, quote, this is what I do. I play drums. What am I going to do? What am I going to be doing standing up on stage and singing? What ended up happening was that it got me away from me just being on my instrument and just looking at music through the point of view of the drums. It also opened my eyes and ears to the great roots music of America. Being around all these pickers and growing up playing a little guitar, I was inspired to pick up a mandolin. And then he goes on and talks about how he picked up his Kentucky mandolin at the Woodstock Music Store. But in general, like, I guess, what is something that, where's an area creatively or, personally or just constitutionally where, you need to push yourself out of your comfort zone in order to grow?
I mean, there's so many. I don't know.
No, like one thing that like
all kinds of shit together.
I dig.
I mean, honestly, I feel like I could spend lifetimes just continuing to get my singing where I wanted. I've worked hard on my singing, and I keep discovering new things about my voice. I'm working really hard on songwriting right now. That's a fascinating process. I love playing piano. I play enough to write with it, but I'd love to get better. I mean, you hang out for 5 minutes with any of the guys that I play with, and I'm like, Jesus, I gotta get, if I could do one little thing like they do, and I don't mean it like where it makes me jealous or insecure, but it's inspiring.
Totally.
So, I mean, I feel that I just hope I keep coming back as a musician. If we do reincarnate, and if that happens, that would be really cool to keep coming back and get better and better every time.
I wanted to close by asking you about, your mom is a very interesting character in the world of music, and kind of flies below the radar. But I did want you to just talk a little bit about, you talked about Jasper Diamond's mom, but I just wanted you to talk about your mom and sort of, the perseverance that it takes to be not just a woman in this society, but also, a creative force, and, what you've kind of taken from her along the way. Obviously she's still here, and but I just wanted you to talk about your mom.
Well, she was, she was a big part of my education in terms of, especially of playing a lot of different music for me, because I fell so deeply in love with Aretha Franklin. Like, I heard Aretha Franklin when I was maybe 13 or 14, or I'm sure I had heard her before then, but that was my first kind of conscious time of hearing her sing, and that was it. I was just in on all soul singers, and I wanted to be any of the women that I was kind of just falling so deep into the phrasing and the tone and the nuances of soul singing and all the early Stax stuff, and that was my great love musically. But then having her make sure that I was listening to Laura Nyro and Dolly Parton and the McGarrigle sisters,
sure,
and all of these, and Joni Mitchell, and like a lot of really brilliant folk artists, all of whom were also deep soul singers, and those artists in particular have a very, very strong kind of line in their thing that I think can easily be traced to the influence of soul music in their own writing and singing, and that was important for me and helped me so much discover my own voice, and she always encouraged me to sing, and she knew that that's what I could do, and she really turned me on to a lot of music and kept pushing me to keep discovering my own voice in a certain way. And so for that, I'm very grateful.
You mentioned reincarnation before. I was wondering if you could talk about if your dad visits you in some way, if you communicate, we've lost. I mean, your dad lived a very hearty existence and definitely left it all in the field. But I just wonder how you guys communicate today.
When my father first passed away, I really had a lot of connection with him and a lot of dreams and a lot of exchanges. And as time has gone by, it's gotten less frequent. That seems to be pretty common for people, and who knows what the mystery of that is. But, I think that we don't really live in a culture where that is. I was just speaking with my friend about this the other day, where we don't live in a culture where we practice those connections.
Exactly. Well, I mean, that's what my show is. Yeah, totally. I agree with you. Yeah.
And it becomes something that's kind of, maybe just because of the way that our culture handles death, it almost becomes something sentimental and sorrowful. And I think that, I don't know, I personally believe that maybe everybody is always present, and maybe time and space and experience move a lot differently when we go to the next. And I have a peaceful feeling about him, and I'm sure that whatever place his spirit resides in is right where he's meant to be. And I think that he left me an incredible gift. His death and the process of his dying, and my own sort of experience, kind of midwifing him through his death, which I didn't expect to do, but that's kind of how it happened. And it left me with a deep faith that we truly get born into something next.
Wow.
It changed my fear of death. It changed my fear of my own death a lot to have gone through that with him. So, I can't say I feel him all the time around me as closely as I did in the first year that he was gone, but
well, for what it's worth, I mean,
he left me with a great faith. He left me with a real internal faith that I have.
I mean, the whole time that we've been talking, this ray of light has been shining in, and again, it's all unquantifiable. But he, even his own. I mean, with my daughters, we have spent so many hours listening to his live performances with Russell Smith singing these songs, Lucretia, and all these incredible tunes. And I just feel like when you put stuff out into the ether, he's still with us. His spirit is still there. And I think the fact that maybe there hasn't been a lot of radio traffic, so to speak, or you haven't felt his presence, that means he is in a really good place. He is in a peaceful spot, and I think that, and most importantly, he's just really proud of you. And after talking to you for 70 minutes, it's just like, really, I just want you to keep growing. I feel like you have many chapters left to write in your book, in this life. And, and I also would, and I think you do this, but, just constantly create for the sake of creation with the people that you love and feel an instant synergy with. But also realize that, don't take anything for granted, and come to that creation with a sense of urgency, and just know that there are no guarantees, and I guess the other thing I would say is, are you planning on coming to Arizona at all to play music? Or because otherwise I'm going to have to, I think my next trip, if you're up for it, I'm a Long Island guy, but I'm going to have to get up to I've never been to the Midnight Ramble ever.
Oh man, you've got to come to the barn. I love Arizona, but there's nothing as far as I know on the books for Arizona, but you should come to the barn. You will love it. It's a very special place, and we should
we'll do another interview.
You know,
I mean, I when we could do it in person, but I'd love to. I really need to. I mean, everybody's up. I mean, even when your dad was rocking that place with you, people would walk into the bathroom and there's your dad's toothbrush there. Just the whole thing sounds totally magical, you know.
It's pretty incredible. And when you can come, please, you know, reach out and let me know ahead of time, and let's make sure it's when I'm going to be there.
Absolutely.
So that I can show you the place and everything, because it's a special room, and there's a couple little things in there that you would really dig seeing downstairs. And we have a little kind of museum set up in the downstairs area where the dressing rooms are and stuff. So we'll definitely make that happen. And thank you so much for the conversation today. I really enjoyed it.
That's all I care about, is that you had a good time. And much love to you, Amy Helm. It's so good to connect with you. We'll do it again.
Thanks, Jake.
All right. Cheers, my friend.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.